What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I want to share with you 5 tips and tricks for planting in the fall. Let's go! The first tip for starting seeds in the fall is also one that I consider a tool. And this tip is to use a shade cloth. This has made a huge difference in the success of my plantings in the fall because you can see Tuck hiding there. Look at this guy. He likes a shade cloth too. But one of the tough parts about starting seed at this time of the year is that it's so hot because we're still in summer. So sprouting that seed and then also transplanting out can be a little tough when you're growing things like brassicas. So this 40% shade cloth makes a considerable difference because when plants are too hot and they get too much sun, they'll tend to grow leggy because it's almost like they're trying to just expand and escape some of that sun. But when it's cool, the plants grow small and compact. So this shade cloth will reduce some of the sun and allow our plants to grow instead of just kind of struggle through this heat. What I like to do when planting for fall is I'll group all the same kinds of seeds together. For instance, brassicas, I'll plant them into one tray. Then I'll bring that tray inside. Once I see those seeds start to sprout, I'll bring it outside and put it underneath this shade cloth, the whole tray. What this shade cloth does is it reduces the amount of sun so these seeds can sprout and then grow relatively well without like that direct beating sunlight, which is too much when the seeds are just sprouting up, especially at this time of the year. So this serves a beautiful function once the seeds are just sprouting too. One thing you'll notice too as you back up a little is that this cover is the cover that I built for the hinged hoop house. This is just the top part of it. So this serves multiple functions. It's created like a little mini greenhouse for me right here, which is super convenient. Then after my seeds are sprouted and they're ready to be transplanted into the ground, I'll use this shade cloth again. After I transplant, I'll cover things with a shade cloth just so their transition into the new spot is okay. Because these are like cool weather crops, things like brassicas, like broccoli and cauliflower going in at a hot time. It's midsummer, so we want to make sure we're kind of protecting those. So this shade cloth will definitely help with that. This is a great tool. You'll notice I use it almost at all stages of growth when it comes to fall planting. I'll even come out here and cover this section after these are grown if it's a really hot day, because reducing some of that sun on a really hot day will allow these brassicas to grow continually instead of just like slowing down when it's too hot for them. The second tip for planting in the fall is actually a trick, and I call this one the carrot board trick. I learned this one from Bill Mollison on one of his old recordings, and I've used it for years. It works fantastic. So what we do is we're going to cover essentially the carrots that we plant with this board. And the reason this works is because carrots, first of all, are very tiny seeds. They don't like to be buried deep. Another thing is it takes a good amount of time for them to germinate, about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's hard to, at this time of year, to maintain a soil moisture for the seeds to germinate for that period of time without it like drying out. So to get good even germination, this trick works amazing. What we do is, first we're just gonna water down this section a little bit that we're gonna plant the carrots in. And I'm gonna plant some of these Napoli carrots here. Only 55 days, pretty nice variety. So, the square foot method says about 16 carrots per square foot. So we could either like break it into 4 rows, or we could just scatter the 16. So I'm just gonna basically do rows here, plant more than I need to, 4 rows, and end up with 16 carrots. So you can see how tiny these seeds are, and I'm just broadcasting these on top of the soil. I always plant more than I need to, just because I like to, and then I'll thin down to 16 carrots. So after we get those seeds in, the next thing I'm going to do is just take just a little local soil and just very lightly dust the seedlings, barely even covering them. Next, I'm just going to very lightly water. We don't want to water too much or it'll wash away the seeds. So we'll just lightly water this. And then we'll take this square foot board that I have, and just place that over top. Now we'll come back in about a week and a half, and check to see if they're germinating. Once we see them start to sprouting, we want to remove the board. This works incredibly well. I've done it for years. One thing I want to mention is you want to use the same kind of carrots for the one board, because some carrots germinate at different rates. So it's good to be doing the same variety. And the reason I want to share this is because there's a bigger all-encompassing idea, and the idea is to learn the requirements of the particular seeds that you're going to be planting. Carrots take a little bit to germinate, and they're kind of particular about how they do it, so you want to use this method, in my opinion, especially at this time of the year. When it comes to growing some things like spinach in the fall, you may have a tough time sprouting those seeds because spinach likes sprouting at a soil temperature of about 45 to 65 degrees. It won't really sprout if it's over 65 degrees. So you may have to do some different things like start those seeds in a cooler area. But knowing the requirements of the particular seeds you're going to be germinating and growing will get you so far ahead and allow you to save time in the long run. The third tip for planting in the fall is to prep and protect. A prudent gardener knows that preparation is one of the keys for a healthy garden. So before we put our transplants into the ground, what we want to do is remove all the old plants and then dig into that soil and assess it. So what I did was I removed all the green beans, the carrots, and anything that was in the section that I wanted to take out, the kales too. Then, after I pulled it out, I dug into the soil, mixed it around a little bit, and noticed that it was really dry. So after I found that it was dry, I decided to put in some cocoa coir to help get a better water retention and lighten up the soil a little bit. And then I also added in some compost to help with the nutrition. So I didn't add a lot of compost because the compost that I have is very hot, meaning that it's got like a lot of nutrition in it. So I just mixed that into the soil, not a lot. And then if these plants need some additional nutrition because brassicas are heavy feeders, then I'll just top dress around the plants. So I made sure that I set up a good scenario for these plants to get plugged right into. After I transplanted everything out, next I moved over to protection. And this is important, especially at this time of the year, because there are so many pests and bugs out, and we're putting in new, sweet, young plants, exactly what these insects want. So we want to make sure we're protecting them. I made a mistake this year though, and the mistake I made is I pulled out my kales too late into the season. I should have pulled them out earlier. The reason this was a mistake was because the kales were infested with whitefly. So when I pulled those kales out, I didn't give enough time for those whiteflies to kind of, get eradicated and leave the garden. Instead, I put the brassicas in right after. Because of that, the whiteflies just went from my old brassicas onto my new young brassicas. So now some of my new young brassicas have some whiteflies in the bottom of them. That's okay though. In order to deal with that, what I did was I sprayed the young plants the day after I transplanted them with some neem oil and some dish soap mix. I've showed you that before in my 5 organic sprays. That's one of my favorite sprays to use, so I use that on these plants. And then in a few days, maybe 4 or 5 days, after these plants are fully adjusted to their new homes, I'm going to come around and spray them with BT, the Thuricide. The reason I'm going to do that is because I can see all the cabbage white butterflies flying all around, and what they're going to do is they're going to lay their eggs on here, and then the cabbage worms are going to try to eat my cabbages. So I'm going to get a step ahead of that. I'm going to spray them with the BT so the cabbage worms don't come. Looks like Tuck's digging a massive hole right here. Hey Tucky, you got a hole, boy? He's probably thirsty, so I got a little water here for him. I'm going to give him a little water. Thirsty boy? Yeah, he's probably thirsty. It's getting hot out here now. That's why the shade cloth is just such a great tool. But hit the like button if you love seeing this guy in the videos. Even though it's hot and it's brutal, he's still out here. He doesn't quit. So we love having him a part of the garden. He's basically the king of the garden and the all-star. Another section that you really want to protect, and what I've had issues with in the past, is my peas. So years ago when I planted peas, they would first sprout out and the birds would come and just take the tops and just eat the tops of the peas before they could really come out and grow really well. So to deal with that, what I do now is I cover the section where I plant my peas with an insect netting, and this makes it so the birds can't get in. My peas grow large and I don't have any issues anymore. My fourth tip for planting in the fall has to do with selecting varieties that will grow late into the season and help your season extend. So when we're planting in the fall, we want to make sure we're growing things like cabbages and cauliflowers, lettuces, things like that, but we also want to grow some super cold hardy things that will grow super late. So some of my favorites are something like the Claytonia. It's got such a good lemony flavor. It's incredibly cold hardy and it's just really good. Also known as miner's lettuce. Tatsoi is also a great one that grows late into the season. It's Asian, it has a nice little flavor to it, and mashi is one that grows really late too. But I found one of the most cold hardy things that I grow out of anything is the white Russian kale. I've had white Russian kale grow all winter long. I'll show you a clip where it was like frozen, but it just like comes back. So I'm in zone 7A and it's grown all winter long. So just by selecting the right varieties, and the right kinds of plants, we could easily extend our harvest. We can also use things like the hinged hoop house, which I built and showed you in the past, to extend our harvest. But if you don't have the opportunity to do that, just choosing the right plants will make considerable difference for extending your season. The fifth tip for planting seeds in the fall is probably the hardest one to master. That's why I left it last. And in my opinion, it's probably one of the hardest things when it comes to new gardeners growing their own seeds in general. And it has to do with proper timing. So this is something that can take years for some people to get, but I'm gonna try to break it down in simplest form so you can maybe digest it easier. And what I like to do is first find out my first expected frost date. So when the first frost is supposed to come. I do that by looking at my zip code online, and I find out that my first expected frost is October 19th. Next, I count how many days I essentially have left until that frost comes, and I decide what I want to plant. For instance, if I want to grow cabbages, then I will plant something like the Ruby Perfection cabbage if I have like 80 days, if I have enough time. But if I don't have enough time, then I'll plant something like the Red Express cabbage that only takes 60 days. So they're still red cabbages, but the length of days is, different. So if you don't have much, you can use the Red Express one. We need to think about though that the plants won't die when the first frost comes. This first frost is just a guidepost. It's not a guarantee that it's going to kill off your plants or that the frost is even going to come. Plus, plants like brassicas, the cabbage, the cauliflower, the kales, they can take some light frosts. So we'll be able to grow past that date. But that's why I like growing a few different kinds, like a long season one and a shorter season one, because we never know what's actually going to happen and what the year is going to bring. By doing this, it kind of ensures ourselves a better harvest. Another thing we have to factor in is as the summer goes on and we get closer to fall, the days are going to get shorter. The days are going to get shorter, but the sun is also going to drop lower in the south, which means some areas that were getting full sun maybe in the midsummer may be shaded at this time of the year. Also, with the sun dropping and the shorter days, the temperatures are going to drop too. And when the temperatures are lower and less sun, that just means the plants are going to grow slower. That's why it's important to get our brassicas in and growing before that cold weather really starts to come. Because if you're trying to grow brassicas for something like the cabbage, then that's going to need more light than something like you're just growing for the greens like the claytonia. So those claytonias and even your kales and the things you're growing just for greens, they'll do better as the temperature drops and as we have less light. But we want to make sure that these kales, these cabbages, are really thriving once the days really shorten, because you're not going to get as much growth with a shorter day and less sun and cooler temperatures. So that's something definitely to factor in. When it comes to starting your seeds, the timing is really the hardest part, and it's tough for me to convey to you proper timing because everything is circumstantial to your particular location. That's why I believe something like a journal is one of our greatest tools, especially for new gardeners. When you can look through your journal, see when you planted things the years before, and then adjust that to your spot, that really creates incredible value, in my opinion. There's one other idea that I want to share with you, and this is another kind of Bill Mollison thing, but it's this idea of phenomenological timing. So timing based on phenomenon. So when it comes to gardening and nature, in my opinion, I see everything moving as cycles as opposed to just lengths of time. So if you could use some phenomenological timing as opposed to just dates, that could really help in your garden. For instance, maybe something as simple as like when the echinaceas start to die down, then I have to start prepping my fall garden. And a really popular one is when the leaf of the oak tree is the size of the ear of the squirrel, it's time to plant your corn. So that's one of those ideas of timing based on phenomenon, because when it comes down to it, nature, like I said, it's really all about cycles as opposed to time. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope these tips bring you a lot of value, because these are really the ones that took my fall garden from something that was like mediocre to a successful, healthy, and productive fall garden. So I hope that they do the same thing for you. I want to thank Caitlin Rayburn for your new channel membership. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. It means a lot to me and Tuck that you're willing to contribute, so thank you. I want to also thank everyone who are giving this super thanks for the channel. That means so much that you're just willing to give, so thank you for that. Before I let you go, I want to let you know to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. Don't forget to check out the merch down low. And remember, whenever you're on Amazon, start your shopping with our Amazon affiliate link. Talking James will be back at you again real soon. We out.